Hi, Dr. P here, and I'm going to speak briefly on the question of how to encourage attack in games with mechanics that favor the offense. Now, this, of course, really only applies for games for more than two players. When it's a two-player game, if there's conflict, then obviously attacking is going to be part of it. But even in two-player games it can happen, and certainly in games for more than two, that players see the advantages of turtling, that is, holding back and watching others fight and reduce their assets as they destroy each other. And I've talked about discouraging turtling by providing economic or other encouragement in other screencasts. This time I'm going to talk about mechanics that give the attacker an inherent advantage. Now, we're going to assume this is generally non-real-time and non-simultaneous adjudication, but it could be. Some games, especially video games, let you adjust the chance for success in small increments. For example, I play an old game called Empire Deluxe Enhanced Edition that lets you adjust a number that governs the relative strength of units. So you raise that number, you're more likely to win when you fight, and you lower that number, you're less likely, although that affects both the attack and the defense. But there's nothing exactly like this available on the tabletop. Of course, one of the advantages of having a computer to track things is that you can do things like this that are not practical in tabletop games. Now, in tabletop games, risk has an obvious advantage for the attacker. The attacker uses 3 dice maximum. The defender only uses 2. Even though the defender wins ties, overall the attacker has the advantage. But as far as I know, this is an addition that Americans made when they published their version of the game. The original French game evidently traded pieces 1 for 1. No dice, no attacker advantage. Chess has the extreme advantage for the attacker. The attacker always wins, even if it's a pawn attacking a queen. That's true in checkers as well. In Stratego, you have a hierarchical method. The higher rank always wins, or if they're the same rank, they kill each other. In China, the Middle Kingdom, which is a Britannia-like game, the designer has given the attackers a better chance to hit than the defenders. So attackers hit on a 4, 5, or a 6, defenders on a 5 or a 6. Now, that's not a subtle method, but it does, or ought to, help promote all China dynasties, which reflects the history of China insofar as that goes. In the micro version in China, the attacker does not have an advantage, but by giving the attacker an advantage in the macro, the designer makes it more likely that there will be dynasties that conquer all of China. Of course, you can have a method where only the attacker can cause damage, which is also not very subtle, but in a sense that's how chess and checkers do it. There are more subtle methods, though. You can have non-simultaneous attacking. Most games, if both sides are attacking, they do it simultaneously. Well, you can let all the attackers resolve first, and then only the surviving defenders can counterattack. Now, I use this in my Hastings 1066, part of the Break the Line series that's coming out, and it's used in other games as well, but it's much more common that both sides can inflict damage. An alternative is an attacking unit resolves its attack, then a surviving defending unit resolves its attack, then a surviving attacking unit, and so on until all of them have resolved their attacks. Now, that's more record keeping because you've got to keep track of who's already attacked, but it's less attacker advantage. It's a subtle advantage, and it's an interesting difference. I've used it in a few games. And if you want subtle advantages, that's one possibility. Keep this in mind. Fighting is always a last resort. Even if you're a general, you don't want to fight. You want to use maneuver to convince the enemy to give up. Battles always involve a lot of uncertainty. So, you may choose to give an advantage to an attacker in your game, but please don't give advantages simply for fighting. For example, don't award victory points for fighting. It's nonsense. It just doesn't fit with the rest of what's going on. Now, many video games give the attacker an inherent advantage when the attacker is the player rather than the computer. But most of them are real-time or simul-adjudication, and both sides are attacking. They're attacking at the same time, and they attack with the same capabilities. In some two-sided situations, the defender may have an advantage in a fight. That's often true in the age of firepower. Remember, there's two ages in warfare: the age of melee, which is more or less one-on-one, and the age of firepower, where additional numbers can mean a great deal, make a great deal of difference in the strength, the relative strength of the sides. Usually in historical situations in historical games, one side has a material superiority but has to succeed within a time limit or lose. And in that context, giving the advantage to the defender is all right, because the person who attacks most of the time is going to have a material superiority. Now, I'm morally certain there are other mechanics to advantage the attacker, and perhaps you can suggest some. Thanks for listening.